Thank you everyone for thank you for joining our talk show. Today I'm proud to introduce Evelyn. And Evelyn is a practitioner of Chinese astrology, and some of her forecasts which she has shared with me quite some time ago has also fallen in line with the global trends that I have also forecasted, and there are some similarities in it. And as we discuss deeper, that we realize that there are certain intertwining of the two that will allow investors to have a wider horizon of what is about to come in the near future, not necessarily immediately, but over a period of time. So maybe Evelyn, you'd like to introduce more about yourself?
Okay, yeah, sure. So today, just a little bit about myself. Actually, I'm an engineering professional, but I have a passion in Chinese astrology, and I do some consultation in Chinese astrology, life energy for people. Besides, I'm a creator of 7 essentials. I'm into supply quality management. If some of you are in, a manufacturing line, you have know what is it. I write books, I design courses, and I'm also a consultant. I've been in the corporate world for the past 30 years, and I'm generally a very logical people. As people say, engineers are really very logical. I solve problems all my life, and I have used multiple tools, which includes Chinese astrology in my career also, later part of my career to solve it. I really wish that I could have learned this Chinese metaphysics skills earlier on, and it has helped me a lot in later part of my career to solve those very difficult, problem. If you are in the corporate world, in the manufacturing world, you will know what I mean, that what are the challenges we have. So these are the books that I've written mostly on my skills in quality engineering, supplier quality management, and also some of these Chinese metaphysics, and taking my skills of sharing my corporate world journey and beyond also with people. One of these books, The Corporate World and Beyond. Okay, so this is just about me. We would like to go through the disclaimer page. Everyone can see the slides, right? Okay, so the disclaimer page is that this content here that we are presenting today is based on our study in the global trend in relation to the 5 elements Chinese astrology. The global trend, layer it with the 5 elements Chinese astrology for you to use as a guideline to make a better investment decision. Because I think the macro economy is sometimes quite unpredictable, where we can want to apply as much tools into it to sort of better eliminate maybe some of the noise from the signal and for a better prediction. It will not be 100% accurate. Okay, this one I need to make a disclaimer here. Then you have to also exercise your caution in investment, especially in such volatile situation, and always end up in doing your own research in the company before you want to invest. Even from my personal experience, I know about Chinese metaphysics. Formerly, I did not know about all this research until, I start to join some of these groups, some of this investment group where they do a very well, company research in a very thorough way. And I only layer with the Chinese metaphysics, then only, chances of me getting a profit or making a right choice in investment is very much higher. It does not really rely on one thing only. And also, because we are not professional financial advisor, no stock advice which stock to buy will be given. Maybe we can give you a snapshot of what sector would be the future trend, but not the actual which stocks advice. Okay, so anything to add on, PC?
Nope. I think for the first half of the session, I leave it up to you.
I do not know how many of you, let me just launch a poll questions. I just wanted to do a poll before I start. Would you do a research on your current and future investment? Can you just type in a yes or a no in the chat box? We have one that, okay, yeah. How about the Would you do a research? Okay. How about the rest? It seems that all is like 50-50. Only one of three. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, never mind. The reason why I ask, okay, good. We have participants that really do a research on the future, current and future trend before they investing. This is the correct way of investment. If you want to have a better control on your investment, not on speculations. So I think we can sort of end the poll. Good morning, everyone. So what we will do is that we shall go through the 5 elements astrology studies, how it related to the global outlooks, why these two can be, correlated to each other. Because I think maybe most of y'all does not have much of exposure into this ancient art of Chinese astrology or Chinese metaphysics, as some masters has termed it. Okay, so let's go through because in Chinese we always believe that there are 5 elements, and these 5 elements are wood, earth, fire, metal, and also water. And where does all these 5 elements comes from? The ancient masters don't pluck all these 5 elements just from the air. What they do is that in the past, people are very free. What they do is that they will study all the movement of the planets. And why 5 elements? The 5 elements are actually the 5 movements of all these planets, which is Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, Venus, and Mercury. And each of them, they will have a certain energy in the orbit which influence the Earth, and the energy will give a different type of results. For example, like woods, it represents growth, okay? And then earth, it will represent stability. Fire will represent happiness and passions. And matter, it will represent execution, altruism. And also water, it means that movement and wisdom. So what they do is all these ancient sages, they record down the path of all these planets. And in the past, they do not call planets because there's no term for planets more than 2,000 plus years ago. What they call is only star in the sky because they are all shining objects in the sky. And from there, they will, record down the movement of planets together with the happenings that is happening around them. And this is how they will also give advice to the ruler of that time. Because last time, no internet, no this one, no news, no this one. So roughly, they will know that, where will the disasters happen in certain parts of China. And the king will, send troops, get ready, all this to this one. So basically, it was already used for geopolitical studies in the past. Okay, and of course, all these 5 elements also can also use it on the personal basis, like destiny analysis, if you heard of it, because of the energy of you, the time you are born, you have already pulled in the energy from the moment itself. What they do is that they will translate, they have the ability to translate a date, like here, this is a date, right? Here, this is a date, like 4th of February 2022, time is 4:52 a.m. And this is actually, we term it as Li Chun, arrival of spring, because I think y'all know, if y'all are followers of like feng shui and also Chinese astrology talk and the annual talk on, on those animal signs and all this, we will probably have heard of Li Chun. If you have not heard of it, you will heard of people queuing up long line in the ATM machine or in the bank, try to deposit money on that special day itself, usually on the 4th of February, because this is the arrival of spring, this is a change of new year, and the feng shui masters will use this day actually to predict the upcoming year, because this is the first day of the new spring for the year itself. And what they do is that 4th of February 2022, 4:52 p.m., they will translate it into the pillar. 2022 is a pillar of the year. Like this year is a tiger year, right? I'm sure everyone knows this year is a tiger year, right? And also, from here, they will translate into an energy pillar here. This is one energy, the 5 elements energy. Within this is consists of water and wood. And then even February itself, is also translated into another pillar, which is the water and also tiger itself. And the day, what is the day? And also this is the red day. That means this is the time of transitioning. And this energy itself, you can see all the 5 elements energy here already. Here, can you tell me that which of the energy is the most prominent here? You can see all the woods, the water. So can you just type in the chat box and tell me, now you can read the chart already. It's very simple. I just teach you how to, translate this. And all these things, the translation, actually, you can use a 10,000 year calendar. There's a cyclic calendar. There it will tell you each month, even this moment here that I'm talking to you, there's also a 4 pillar like this. Okay, so from here, my dear friends, can you tell me that which energy of these 5 elements is the most prominent? Anyone? Just give me a feedback in the chat. Either wood or water or earth or metal. Yeah, that's right, William. Thanks for your feedback. So wood is very prominent because you can see. Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, a lot of people. Yes, now you are very good already. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 because I translate into a graphic format. This is my own format. You cannot find this translation in the you can find these 4 pillars, but the graphics is my own creation. Okay, so yes, it's wood. Correct. Very good. Bravo. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so now you understand already. Next is okay. So this is what influenced the outlook for the year itself. Once you know already, it will be what are the elements that is prominent in the chart itself for the year, for the Li Chun, the transition to the spring, and also the interaction of the 5 elements. There are 2 layers here that governs the whole charts. Okay, this is how the chart is being read. I explained to you the fundamentals, why it makes sense, why in a way that it has certain scientific meaning to it. So you can see that wood itself is the most prominent energy. And secondly, is actually water. You can see a lot of water here also. Earth is not so much. That's why you can see that is property doing well this year? Is property very prominent? Normally, that element has not so many in the chart one. Normally, they will not either receive a lot of attention or they will not be very prominent either way. Okay,
Yeah,
so
I would like to add on that right now in the US, it is a lot of economists are forecasting a housing crisis. Just yesterday's data showed that there is the highest cancellation of pending home sales since March 2020. And in China, the housing market since last year to this year has collapsed about 20 to 30%. Okay, so it not only affect just maybe some of you with Malaysian experience, but also it's getting more and more prominent. And the statistics from the US is pointing towards a housing crisis. Yeah, Evelyn.
Okay, yeah, that's right. And also, another prominent element which you cannot see, and normally we don't regard that prominent element because earthly branch, there is a lot of hidden stems one. Also inside got elements one, got 5 elements, which I did not show here. But actually, because there are 3 woods, if you see in the earthly stem, which is hidden one, 1, 2, 3 across the pillar. That means that shows that the element is quite prominent, which is actually fire side. The tiger. Those that knows a bit of Chinese metaphysics will know what I mean, because there will be fire here. So that's why there's also some energy related crisis or either any energy related kind of attention. That means the energy sector will also receive some attention. This, I think PC can also support that also later on the energy crisis and all these things.
Yeah.
So all these with the elements, they will represent a certain sector that will do well in this year. or will receive attention. They'll either do well, they will either receive some attention or become very prominent that people suddenly look at it. These three things, not necessarily that only one path. There are a couple of options here, A, B, C, one. So whether they will do well, all this will depend on the interaction. That will be, a deeper reading already. So what happened is that you can see even this chart itself shows that there's no metal here. In a deeper sense, because just now I say that this one will depends on the interaction, because the day itself is our focal point. Any chart when you read, day is always the focal point, especially the heavenly stamp. So you can see because Earth create metal, so there is no actually productivity. In another words, that is the meaning of it. This one is very simple to read because this signal is very clear. Normally, some charts, they're not that easy to read because the signal is not clear. This one is very straightforward, okay? So that is why we can really read that there's no this one. So out of all this, with the wood, from here, we already know that wood represents agriculture generally. My YouTube channel has a talk on all these 5 elements on what industries that represent or what economic activities. Later on, I will give you the link and you can go into it and check out the YouTube video later on. And then water represents, something related to logistic, fast-moving consumer goods and all these things. So in terms of 5 elements and agriculture, that is, here means that wood agriculture sector will receive attention. Okay, it also represents clothing, and wood also represent growth. It also actually represent clothing and fashion, and also education.
Yes. Type your questions in the chat box rather than use the mic, because rather than use the audio, because sometimes the noise level we cannot hear the questions too clearly also. So don't mind if you can type your question in the chat box if you have any.
So generally, you already got the outlook that what is the 5 elements energy in Chinese astrology, and also how do you translate it into a time pattern, into a year, month, and day, hour chart, and then you can use it as a transition point to predict the economy of the year. So the next one we want to go to is that itself here, that we will look at the prominent energy. We already looked at it, the wood, the water, and also the fire. Fire could be energy, could be technology. And also besides that, we also look at another layer, which I also look at is in I Ching about fellowship as well. So this year, people are very, they wanted to build their own tribes. They have seen, like influencer and all this, they are building their own tribe. It's all about fellowship as well. So the I Ching words of wisdom for the year is fellowship is very important. This is how we, look at all these things here. Okay. Next is the wood, education, agriculture, logistic. I think logistics also receive a lot of attention this year, right? Some are doing very well. Some, they receive a lot of attention due to, I think, the logistic or shipment of goods. The sea freight is not moving. And also in terms of energy, technology, or either, this one is more towards, I look at it more towards energy itself, that also will receive a lot of attention. Probably it could be, an energy crisis coming up. Okay.
I think with regards to logistic, it's going to get much worse. In fact, the National Union for the Railway Workers in the US, they are now in a period of cooling off with their employers, and that cooling off period will lapse into midnight of July 18. If let's say there's no arbitrage between both the employers and the union, then it will be a nationwide strike in the US railroad system. And that means that the shipment of goods across trans-US is going to be halted via railroads. And that would mean even less food and essentials being transported across cities in the US. And concurrently, recently, the UK also have another railroad workers strike. And right now, as Shanghai port has loosened out, the ships are now moving to other areas. In the port of Los Angeles, there's now another traffic jam building up. So which means more ships are being, more ships needed to wait outside offshore the port, waiting to be unloaded or loaded onto the ships. So this is the shipping and logistic problem is looking set to persist for quite a long time.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for explanation. When I collaborated with PC, then we sort of layer this together. I find that everything makes sense and fall into places also. This is what my section on the explanation to build your foundation on how does Chinese astrology is correlated to the global finance and the geopolitical trend that we are looking now at it, that we are experiencing now. Actually, this is a really very crazy year. And actually, we are also transitioning into new period, which we'll talk about in the future. PC, over to you to talk about the global financial and geopolitical trend.
Yep. Let's talk about the worsening geopolitical situation. Now, I believe that the Russia and Ukraine war will likely stretch through the winter. In fact, Russia is going to teach the EU a very nasty lesson because they have confiscated almost 50% of Russia's foreign reserves. And Russia, many strategists believe Russia is going to move on to connect the Donbas region to the Transnistria region, which is next to Moldova. That means securing the southern side of Ukraine, which has the prize city of Odessa. Now, Odessa and Mariupol actually contributed 50% of global neon gas production, and Russia contributes the other 30%. So neon gas is very important because it is needed by the EUVs in order to manufacture the high-end microchips. So if let's say Russia secured Odessa, that means that there won't be enough because Russia will be sanctioned anyway. So Mariupol and Odessa already stopped production of neon gas. That means that the semiconductor manufacturing is going to take a hit. Okay, and when that is done, the entire Ukraine will be landlocked. Okay, and Ukraine state would have lost all its productive resources, which is in the Donbas and the agricultural side of its economy. Okay, which is its Donbas, east and southern Ukraine. So that itself would, because the European Union and NATO and all these countries have entered too deep into it, they are unwilling to negotiate peace. In fact, they continue to send money to Ukraine to prolong the war because they want to weaken Russia. Their objective is actually to weaken Russia so that the Russia will come begging to the European Union and the US so that eventually they will invest in their resources and, at a very, very cheap rate, taking over Russia giant companies. So that's why they wanted the sanctions. The reason why they want to hurt Russia to the most is that they can secure Russia resources when Russia come begging, but actually Russia overturned the table on them. So that's why Russia is going to teach the EU a very serious lesson, which I think they would prolong the war through the winter to secure Odessa. So then the European Union will have to think whether they want to continue funding Ukraine, which has become a landlocked piece of land without the economic resources to repay the debt that Ukraine will owe the EU, which then will cause the EU and US to bleed because they already contributed so many billions to support Ukraine. So that is the end game. Now, there's also, of course, tension in the South and East China Sea will worsen due to NATO's involvement in the area. Right now, there's NATO plus, the Quad, the AUKUS, so many, military alliances to contain China. Now, the reason why they want to contain China is that China is going to surpass the US as the world's largest economy on a nominal standpoint by 2028. And that is why you see the US is sending a lot of senators selling weapons to Taiwan, because they want to push Taiwan to declare independence.
Yeah.
Because if, let's say, when that happens, then they would be able to seize China's asset globally, like what they did to Russia. And China's asset globally is estimated to be 50 trillion. Okay, so that is the intention. They want to create something to be able to confiscate all the money, because the entire European Union and the Japan, which is also wanting to get involved in Taiwan, and the US, their debt to GDP is so much higher, okay, than China's. So that is why they want to seize their asset to replenish their coffer. So it's just another method of colonizing, only that now it's done economically. And that's why I think tension in Southeast Asia, South and East China Seas were actually going to worsen. And of course, that's, yeah.
You go ahead. Yeah, I have something to add also. Okay, because from the point of the war, it will not end that soon also. That's very true, because from the year of the child, and fire is also quite strong this year, as I already pointed out. So fire also could mean military wars and all these things. So it's the same thing that here. But however, I don't think the collapse of China and Russia will happen, because they will be in the prominent region of growth for the next 20 years. The rules of Southeast Asia applies in the next 20 years, which is a transition into the new eras.
Yeah, and I think that is why Russia and China are working on a plan to start their own BRICS financial money, their BRICS monetary system, so that it allows them to break away from the US dollar. And the moment they encourage more countries to break away from the US dollar, then the US dollar hegemony will be at risk. That is because the European Union and US, they constitute only 777 million people, but the BRICS nation constitute the 3.2 billion people, 40% of global population, and 25% of the global economy. So once the BRICS insulate itself from the US dollar, that means that all the US dollar that has ever been sent overseas will come back to the US, and that will cause hyperinflation in the US. So that is why I think we are now seeing a multi-level war being fought, not a kinetic war, but economically as well as financially. Yeah. So then, of course, there's the potential escalation in Syria and Turkey incursion in the north. Turkey is actually playing both sides. Okay, wanted to be nice to Russia, but also wanting to get rid of the Kurdish terrorists that often harass its southern border. So Syria will continue to be a reason for multi-countries involvement, because Israel is right now bombing Syria. Turkey is attacking the Kurdish in the north, and US is securing the northeastern oil region, okay, so that they can funnel the oil into Iraq to process. So it's like actually stealing Syria's resources. So that's why Syria could be the flashpoint, and if not, it could also be Turkey. It could also be Iran, which is also at risk of attack from Israel. Yeah, so Middle East may be on a third level type of situation, but the biggest one will be the Russia-Ukraine war and South China Sea. And the Ukraine war, why supporting Ukraine, where the EU and US is concerned, is just to weaken Russia. When they carve out Russia, the eventual price is actually China. They want to push China back to the Mao era. okay, because they see that they cannot allow China to rise because it will supersede all their expectations, okay? So
it will never happen.
This is the this is the end game. So
Yeah.
the other thing is that the worsening economic situation. US will likely see a recession. Q1 GDP is at 1.6%. Q2 GDP is now forecast at being negative as well. Previously, when I was doing this slide, it was 2.1%. Now it's reversed to 1.2%. Okay, the latest update. But anyway, it's still negative. So technically, and I think the GDP will be much worse, definitely, because consumer sentiment has now reached record low in June. Okay, that means June spending is going to be very badly hit, and consumption constitutes 70% of the US economy. The other thing is that the business optimism, small business optimism has fallen to record low also in the month. I think when they did the research was in the month of July. So that means that Q3 is not going to be pretty as well. So the EU and Japan will likely slide into recession after EU's inflation spiked 8.8% year on year and Japan's inflation spiked 2.5% year on year. Well, 2.5% may seem very little compared to the Europe inflation, but if you look at it, Japan has been in a deflation. So right now, from deflation into inflation, it signifies something is very wrong, okay, in the Japanese economy, because due to the erosion of the value in the yen. So energy crisis assailing the US, EU, and Japan will ensure that inflation remains high, especially if the Russia-Ukraine war extends into the winter. Now, the energy crisis, people say that, hey, you know, once it goes into recession, the price of oil will actually go down. Yes, it's quite possible, but what people fail to understand is that inflation is not caused by the war in Ukraine. Inflation is due to the expansion of money supply since 2008, which the balance sheet of the combined major banks have increased by some 30 trillion. Okay, so that is what caused the expansion of the inflation was the expansion of money supply, and that expansion of money supply will have to play into the economy no matter what. Okay, so they might bring inflation, you know, the Fed intends to hike to 3.5%. Okay, then they expect the inflation would come down because of a deflation impact. But this is the same thing that happened in the 1970s. In the 1970s, after the US brought itself out of the backing by gold, there was an immediate inflation. Then the Fed came in, okay, raised interest rate, inflation was brought back down to 5%. But US had a recession from 1974 to 1976, of which then the Fed started easing, and from 1976 to 1980, inflation spiked to 13%. So that time, the Paul Volcker from the Fed has the ability to raise interest rate from 18 to 20% to bring the inflation down back to more sustainable level. But right now, with the US debt to GDP at 30 trillion, a 20% interest rate, okay, would mean 6 trillion, more than what the US take in as tax revenue of 4.5 trillion. And even if they raise it to 10% to beat the 8.6% inflation, that would entail 3 trillion in the debt payment. And that would constitute 75% of its tax revenue. So there is no way, okay, that the US will be able to pay that kind of interest with such high interest rate. And therefore, the situation will continue to deteriorate. The Fed unable to raise interest rate to fight inflation, and they eventually will allow the dollar to weaken because of recession. If they continue to hike into the recession, it will cause a depression. And that depression will ensure that the US economy will take decades to recover. During the 1930s, 1929, in fact, the Great Depression started, and it took the US until 1955 before it reached back the same level where the Dow Industrial Index is concerned as 1929. So it took about 23 years. So that's why the US cannot afford depression. Now, the EU is warning of a need to ration energy, and the UN is expecting a global food crisis to come as early as summer. And in fact, we already see it in Sri Lanka. People are without food, without energy. China's growth is expected to be tepid due to ongoing bouts of lockdown. So this is telling you the economic story already. Now, EU need to ration energy means the EU industrialization, especially a powerhouse industry like Germany, is going to suffer. In fact, Germany's business optimism, I think, fell into decades low. Okay, so sometimes, people wonder whether was the US intention to destroy Russia by implementing the sanction, or intention was to destroy the EU economy, okay, by pushing EU to sanction Russia. Because if we look at it in terms of foreign currency reserves, next to the US, the majority of reserve held as foreign currency is actually the euro. So if, let's say, US destroy the EU and the euro, means the US will have no close competitor. Okay, so this is a question, of course. You can look at it both ways, but it's due to all the basically, I think it's the idiots running the EU Parliament, okay, which are actually members that are selected and not elected, okay, and all of them has a very biasness towards Russia. So here we can see that stagflation is, and this is a chart by the forecast, okay, by the World Bank, the IMF, okay, that inflation will continue to rise and growth will continue to fall, and that is a stagflation. So central banks are likely to lose their battle against inflation as governments teeter on the edge of insolvency, leading to a reversal in monetary policy, thus making inflation much worse. And in fact, the ECB was saying, hey, we are going to do QT. Then when they look at the yield from the Italian bonds here, hitting 600% higher, then they say we also have to look at the fragmentation of the EU, and therefore we need to support the southern peripheral countries. So it's like, they want to do QT on the rich country, but on the poor country, they want to do QE. So that is going to cause a lot of people from the rich country very, very angry towards the ECB, because how can they be financing the much weaker countries when their economy is really in the doldrums? And that is why stagflation will persist. Now, let's look at the worsening financial situation. So the Fed total assets have increased to 36.3, okay, as a percent of the nominal GDP. The ECB is even worse at 67.4, and BOJ is the worst one, 134. Now, PBOC, the People's Bank of China, is actually, you can see the downtrend line. They know the financial risk, and therefore they want to start cutting before they're exposed to higher risk. But the BOJ has actually gone nuts, okay? Now, the sheer debt which the Fed, ECB, and BOJ have monetized make it difficult for respective central banks to tighten monetary policy. Total global debt to GDP now stands at 305 trillion, or 351% of global GDP. There is no way that this amount of debt will be unwound. A recession in the US, EU, and Japan will push global GDP down and worsen the debt to GDP ratio. So, in fact, everyone is picking in a recession, okay? And that is why you see the yields inversion, the 2-year versus the 10-year yield inversion, that every time it reached a negative level has predicted a recession ahead. So I think the most at risk will be the EU and Japan due to structural failure in their respective financial system. You can see that the euro has fallen. In fact, this was done a few days ago. Just yesterday, it has fallen slightly below parity, which means it has fallen below $1. per euro. And then the Japanese yen is no longer at 135, it's at 137. So as I mentioned, EU could face fragmentization, which means the destruction of the EU, and Japan risks entering into an economic disaster. So if the BOJ refuses to increase interest rate, then the Japanese yen will continue to weaken, and as it weakens, inflation will become higher. Now, some economists are predicting a hyperinflation in Japan, okay, unless the BOJ steps in and increase interest rate to help the Japanese yen, gain in value versus the US dollar. Otherwise, it will be runaway inflation in Japan. And that is why how we see it is still going to be an economic disaster. If they hike interest rate, then the Japanese government can become insolvent, okay, because of too much debt. And if, let's say, they don't hike interest rate, then the Japanese economy will suffer inflation, very much like the US, okay? It's all this is because of almost more than a decade of money printing by the major central banks.